friends, it's Miss McConnell. I'm here for some story time, and we're continuing with Sideways Stories from Wayside School. And today we're going to start on Chapter 20. Chapter 20 is about Kathy. Kathy doesn't like you. She doesn't know you, but she still doesn't like you. She thinks you are not smart. In fact, she thinks you are the least smart person she doesn't know. What do you think about that? She also thinks you are not good looking. As a matter of fact, she thinks you are the least good looking person she doesn't know. And she doesn't know a lot of people. She doesn't like the people she knows either. She doesn't like anybody in Mrs. Jewell's class. She did like one member of the class. She liked Sammy. She thought he was funny. Sammy was a dead rat. But Kathy has good reasons for not liking any of the children she knows. She doesn't like DJ because he smiles too much. And she doesn't like John because he can't stand on his head. Kathy once had a cat named Skunks. She liked Skunks, but she was afraid that Skunks would run away. "You have nothing to worry about, Kathy," said Mrs. Jewell. "Skunks won't run away. Just be nice to him and feed him and pet him, and he won't run away. He may go out and play, but he'll always come back." "No, you're wrong, Miss Jewell," said Kathy. "What do you know? He'll run away." So Kathy kept Skunks locked up in her closet at home. She never let him out, and sometimes she even forgot to feed him. One day, while Kathy was looking for her other shoe, Skunks ran out of the closet and never came back. "You said he would come back, Mrs. Jewell," said Kathy. "He never came back. You were wrong. I was right." That was why Kathy didn't like Miss Jewell. "The next time I get a cat, I'll kill him. That way he'll never run away," said Kathy. Then there was the time that Damien tried to teach Kathy how to play catch. Damien said, "When I throw the ball, Kathy, try to catch it." "I can't catch it," said Kathy. "I'll just get hurt." "You won't get hurt," Damien insisted. "Just watch the ball." He tossed it to her, but Kathy knew she would get hurt. She closed her eyes. The ball hit her on the cheek. It hurt. Kathy began to cry. "You were wrong," she sobbed. "I was right." That was why Kathy didn't like Damien. Allison believed that if you are nice to someone, then they'll be nice to you. So one day, she brought Kathy a cookie. "I don't want your ugly cookie," said Kathy. "It probably tastes terrible." Alan said, "No, it's very good. I made it myself." Kathy said, "If you made it, then it must stink. You can't cook. You're not smart enough." She just put the cookie in her desk along with her pencils, crayons, and books. 3 weeks later, Kathy was hungry. "All right, Allison," she said. "I'll try your stupid cookie." She took it out of the desk. It was covered with dust. She bit it. It was hard and tasted terrible. "See," said Kathy, "I was right." That was why Kathy didn't like Allison. Yes, Kathy had very good reasons for not liking anybody she knew. But she also has a good reason for not liking you. And she doesn't even know you. Her reason is this. She knows that if you ever met her, you wouldn't like her. You don't like Kathy, do you? See? She was right. It's funny how a person can be right all the time and still be wrong. Kathy brought all of that onto herself, don't you think? She wasn't a nice person. All right, chapter 21 is about Ron. Ron had curly hair and little feet. "I want to play kickball," he said. "You can't play," said Terrence. "Get out of here," said Dee Dee. "Scram," said Jason. "I want to play kickball," said Ron. "Well, you're not playing," said Terrence. "Beat it." Ron stomped across the playground to the hopscotch area. Jenny was playing hopscotch with Lewis. Jenny was on 9. Lewis was on 4, but it was his turn. "I want to play kickball," Ron said. "So go play kickball," said Lewis. "Terrence won't let me play," said Ron. Lewis walked with Ron to the kickball field. "Hey, what about our hopscotch game?" Jenny asked. "You won," said Lewis. "I just beat Lewis in hopscotch," Jenny announced. Leslie, Rondi, and Allison flocked around her. "Hey, Lewis," Damien shouted. "Do you want to play kickball?" "All right," said Lewis. "Ron and I will both play." "No," said Terrence. "Ron isn't playing." "Anyone who wants to play can play," said Lewis. "No, he can't," said Terrence. "It's my ball." It isn't your ball, said Lewis. You gave it to me, said Terrence. I gave it to you to share, said Lewis. If you can't share it, you can't have it. Oh, all right, said Terrence, but I get to pitch. Ron and I will stand, everybody, Lewis announced. All right, said Jason. We'll kill them. We'll murder them, said Dee Dee. We'll smash them, said Myron. We'll see, said Lewis. Ron pitched, and Lewis played the other 8 positions. 20 minutes later, they finally got 3 outs. The score was 21-0. Ron was up first. Infield in, shouted Damien. Everybody stood within 10 feet of home plate. All right, Ron, Lewis shouted. Kick it over their heads. Ron kicked the ball only 3.5 feet. Todd picked it up and threw him out. Lewis was up. Everybody ran back to the edge of the outfield. Still, Lewis kicked the ball over their heads for a home run. Everybody ran all the way back in again for Ron's up. He kicked the ball only 2 feet. Dee Dee tagged him out. Lewis kicked another home run. Ron then kicked the ball a foot and tripped over it on his way to first base. 3 outs. Ron and Lewis held the other team to only 5 runs with the next inning. That was because the bell rang. Lunch was finally over. Lewis and Ron lost 26-2. Ron had a wonderful time. The next day, Ron said, I want to play kickball. You can't play, said Terrence. Get out of here, said Jason. Scram, said Dee Dee. I want to play kickball, Ron told Lewis. Lewis walked with him to the kickball field. Ron and I will stand all of you. Everybody liked the teams. Ron pitched while Lewis played the other 8 positions. They lost 57-2. After the game, Lewis took Ron aside. Listen, Ron, he said, why do you always want to play kickball? You can't kick. You can't field. You can't even run to first base. You just get smashed every time. Hey, now wait a second, said Ron. Don't go blaming it all on me. You're half the team too, you know. And with that, he punched Lewis in the stomach. And he punched a heck of a lot harder than he kicked. Chapter 22. The 3 Erics. In Mrs. Jewell's class, there were 3 children named Eric. Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and Eric Ovens. They were known throughout the school for being fat. Eric Fry sat at this edge of the room. Eric Bacon sat in the middle of the room. And Eric Ovens sat at the end of the room. There was a joke around Wayside School that if all 3 Erics were ever on the same side of the room at the same time, the whole school would tip over. Eric Bacon hated jokes like that. That is not surprising. After all, he wasn't even fat. In fact, he was the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jewell's class. But nobody seemed to notice. The other 2 Erics were fat, and so everyone just thought that all the Erics were fat. But I'm not fat, Eric Bacon insisted. What's your name? Asked Jason. Eric, said Eric Bacon. Then you're fat, Jason concluded. And pretty soon, skinny little Eric Bacon, the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jewell's class, had the nickname Fatso. Eric Fry really was fat. He was also the best athlete in Mrs. Jewell's class. His body was solid muscle. However, nobody ever noticed. The other 2 Erics weren't very good at sports. Eric Ovens was clumsy. Eric Fatso Bacon was a good athlete for his size, but because he was so skinny, he didn't have much power. So, naturally, everybody just assumed that Eric Fry was also clumsy and weak. After all, his name was Eric. Whenever the other kids choose up teams, Eric Fry was the last one picked. They never noticed his home runs or the fabulous catches he made. Like all great athletes, he made the impossible look easy. Of course, the other kids did notice the one time that he dropped the ball. Eric Fry was playing right field. Terrence belted a deep fly to the left. Eric Fry raced all the way across the field after the ball and at the last second dived at it. He caught it mid-air in his fingertips, but as he hit the ground, the ball squirted loose. Well, what do you expect from Butterfingers? Said Stephen. And since that time, Eric Fry has had the nickname Butterfingers. Eric Ovens was the nicest person in Miss Jewell's class. He treated everyone equally and always had a kind word to say. But because his name was Eric, everyone thought he was mean. Fatso was mean because everyone called him Fatso. Butterfingers was mean because he always had to play right field. So naturally, everyone just assumed that Eric Ovens was also mean. They called him Crabapple. Good morning, Allison, said Eric Evans. How are you? Lay off, Crabapple, will ya? Answered Allison. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. All three of the Erics had nicknames. It was better that way. Otherwise, when someone said, "Hey, Eric," no one knew to whom he was talking. One time, all the Erics would answer, and the next time, none of them would answer. But when someone said, "Hey, Crabapple," then Eric Evans knew they were talking to him. And if someone said, "Hey, Butterfingers," Eric Fry knew they meant him. And when someone said, "Hey, Fatso," Eric Bacon knew it was him who was being called. Now, that chapter is not, as far as name calling, it's not very kind. It's also teaching us a very important lesson. And that is that you can't just think that somebody is a certain way because other people have something in common with that person. So what they have in common is their name, Eric. But that doesn't mean that the other Erics are like that Eric. The other thing is we don't want to be saying things that are body shaming. So things about being fat or skinny or how good that makes you at different things in life, that's not something that's so kind to be saying to somebody. So I think that's a really good point that the author is trying to make. Even though they're kind and they're great at sports and they're just fine, they're still getting these nicknames that aren't cool at all. So just wanted to point that out to you guys. That's an important thing about that chapter. Okay, chapter 23 is Allison. Here's Allison. Allison had pretty blonde hair and always wore a sky blue windbreaker. Her windbreaker was the same color as her eyes. She was best friends with Rondi. Rondi had blonde hair too, but she was missing her 2 front teeth. Allison had all of her teeth. Allison used to say that she knocked Rondi's teeth out. Allison was very pretty, so all the boys in Mrs. Jewell's class teased her, especially Jason. But Allison said, "Leave me alone or I'll knock your teeth out like I did Rondi's." The boys didn't bother her after that. One day, Allison brought a tangerine for lunch. She took the peel off in one piece. Miss Mush, the lunch teacher, walked up to her. "Allison, may I have your tangerine?" she asked. Miss Mush always gave food to the children, so Allison was happy to give the tangerine to Miss Mush. Miss Mush shoved it in her mouth and swallowed it in less than 4 seconds. Allison left the lunchroom and walked down to the library. The lunchroom was on the 15th story. The library was on the 7th. Allison already had her book. She just went to the library because it was nice and quiet there. The librarian walked up to Allison. "What are you reading?" she asked. Allison told her the name of the book. "That sounds like a good book," said the librarian. "I never read that one. May I borrow it?" The librarian always lent books out to the children. Allison was glad to be able to return the favor. She gave the librarian the book, then walked down the stairs outside to the playground. All of Allison's friends were playing freeze tag. Allison didn't feel like playing. She reached into the pocket of her sky blue windbreaker and took out a tennis ball. She bounced it a couple of times on the ground. Louis came up to her. "Hi, Allison," he said. "May I play with your tennis ball?" Louis always gave balls to the children. Allison happily gave her ball to Louis. Louis threw the ball all the way to the other side of the playground. Then he went chasing after it. Allison didn't feel like doing anything. Jason ran up and tagged her. "You're frozen," he said. "Get out of here before I knock your teeth out," said Allison. Jason shrugged his shoulders and laughed. Allison went back inside, up the 30 flights of stairs to Mrs. Jewell's room. The lunch period wasn't over yet, but Allison didn't feel like doing anything else. She had given her food to the lunch teacher, her book to the librarian, and her ball to the yard teacher. She went inside her classroom. Mrs. Jewell's was there. "Oh, Allison, I'm glad you're here," said Mrs. Jewell's. "I'm having trouble with a math problem. Maybe you can help." "Sure," said Allison. Mrs. Jewell's always helped the children with their problems. Allison was happy to help. "How do you spell chair?" said Mrs. Jewell's. "Chair," said Allison. "Yes, that's right," said Mrs. Jewell's. "I knew it wasn't CHARE, but I couldn't remember what it was." "That's not a math problem," said Allison. "That's spelling." "Yes, you are right again," said Mrs. Jewell's. "I always get those two mixed up." The bell rang. The lunch period was over. Allison could hear the other children running up the stairs. "Allison," said Mrs. Jewell's, "you learned a very important secret today, and I don't want you to tell any of the other children, not even Rondi." "What was that?" asked asked Allison. She didn't even know she had learned a secret. She loved secrets. You learned that the children are really smarter than their teachers, said Mrs. Jules. Oh, that's no secret, said Allison. Everybody knows that. My question for you guys is, do you know that? Are all of you students smarter than us teachers? Well, I hope that you're enjoying this book so far. We're going to stop right there at the end of chapter 23.